Let's talk, Congressman, about these trade negotiations. As you know, the president loves this proposal, and you have come out against it. Do you think the president's just wrong on this?
I think he's wrong on a couple of key points. First of all, I support expanded trade. I'm a member of the President's Export Council, and in our community, if our manufacturers can sell more products overseas, it's good for our local economy. So I support expanded trade, but the rules of trade really have to be right. This deal falls short in that it does not deal with currency manipulation. If you take Japan, for example, they have about an $8,000 advantage for every vehicle that they produce over an American vehicle when it comes to exports, just based on their ability to manipulate the value of the yen against the dollar. Now that's really technical, but the bottom line is if we don't deal with currency manipulation, we really are not opening up the trading barriers that we're trying to overcome, and this agreement does not address trade. There are other problems. Vietnam is a member of the negotiation. They have a centralized economy. It's a communist country, no human rights, no labor rights, very little environmental protection. So my view is if Vietnam wants to join, let them deal with those weaknesses in their system first, then we can invite them to the table, rather than hoping that they'll live up to the promise that they'll correct those deficiencies. So, you know, we need to, I agree that we need to do it, but we need to do it right, and I think this deal falls far short.
If this deal is approved, the president's deal, how would that impact, say, the truck plant in Flint there on Van Slyke Road?
Well, what would happen is eventually the tariffs that we have that protects us from Japanese vehicles flooding our market, those tariffs would come down. They continue to manipulate their currency. We could see Japanese trucks competing against American trucks on an uneven playing field. So we can't predict what the ultimate result will be, but one thing we know for sure, just as the American auto industry is getting back on their feet and actually producing great products, we can't afford to have a trade deal that takes the rug out from underneath our feet. And that's what I would be afraid that the deal as it's currently structured would do.
Switch now to the Affordable Care Act. What if the Supreme Court strikes this down? What would happen, say, in Michigan?
Well, it would mean that Michigan citizens who purchase their health care on the federal exchange would no longer be eligible for the subsidies. And look, nobody here in Washington or in Lansing interpreted the law to mean that. This is just another opportunity for the Attorney General Schuette and others to attack the Affordable Care Act because they don't like it. But no one here in Washington, or even when the debate over whether Michigan should create its own exchange, nobody ever said that if Michigan failed to create an exchange, that its citizens would be ineligible for the subsidies. They expected that they would, no matter whether they're in the federal or state exchange. It will create some chaos. It'll be basically on Washington and frankly the Republicans in the House and Senate to determine whether or not they want to fix the anomaly or the misinterpretation. I hope they do. Frankly, I hope the court rules as we expect it will and rules that no matter where you live, which state you're in, you're eligible for the support that the Affordable Care Act provides for everyday hardworking Americans to get health care at an affordable price.
But if the Supreme Court, turns it down, is there a plan B here in our state?
Well, at that point in time, the state of Michigan could do what it should have done a long time ago, and that is to create a state exchange. It's likely that there would be a federal response to correct this anomaly. This really is a question of sort of politically interpreting the intent of the law and taking advantage of what might have been some inartful language that wasn't explicit. So Congress could easily fix the problem if the court does rule against these hardworking Americans who are just trying to buy health care at a reasonable price.
Let's go to ISIS.
Okay.
The president wants to send in advisors there. What do you think? You think that will work?
Well, first of all, I'm concerned that we continue to escalate. We do need to support those fighters who are trying to push back against ISIS. My concern is that if it's only the United States that continues to bring support to those who are trying to fight ISIS, that we're letting those other nations in the region off the hook. So my hope is that if we supply additional training and equipment, which I do support, that we limit it to that. And I'm concerned about sort of the slippery slope that we have a history here in the country, in the United States, of starting with advisors, and then that leads to something much more robust. I hope that the President will continue to push on those other nations in the region, the Saudis, the Jordanians, others who have stepped up, even the Egyptians, to bring some of their resources to this fight in a much more robust way. I think that's the more sustainable approach, and I think that's what the President should be pushing for.
Let's move back to the Supreme Court and same-sex marriage. How do you think the Supreme Court will vote on that?
Well, I hope, and I do believe, that the court will find that no matter who you are and who you love, that you have the right to pursue happiness in your own way, and that they will affirm that marriage equality is a basic, fundamental right that should be afforded all Americans. I think it was unfortunate that Michigan decided to appeal the case that went to the U.S. District Court, but I think the Supreme Court has been weighing in on this question. I was on the steps of the Supreme Court 2 years ago when the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down. I hope that they will stand on the side of justice and equality and rule that no matter who you are and who you love, that you should be able to pursue happiness in your own way and stand for marriage equality.
Now to government spending, do you think that there will be another government shutdown?
I think it's possible. I mean, one of the problems that I see is that we continue to try to balance the entirety of the federal budget by cutting the most important investments that we make in college, in transportation, in infrastructure, in our environment. We're really not reflecting the values of the American people in our budget deliberations. And despite the fact that Republicans have control of both the House and the Senate, it's becoming increasingly clear that what they've been complaining about all along, and that is divided government has prevented them from adopting a budget, is proving to be untrue. They can't agree between the House and the Senate, both led by Republicans, on a budget. So it looks like we will yet again face another, what we call an omnibus spending plan, which means not a complete budget. And it may be that that plan won't come together, or even they can't put the votes together, and that could force another shutdown. I hate to see it happen. The American people are sick of these fiscal cliffs that are basically creations of Congress's own dysfunction, but I think that's something that we're going to have to keep our eye on.
Congressman, let's wrap this up with a political question for you on your political future. We've read that your name is being bandied about as a possible candidate for governor of Michigan. Is that an office that you would be interested in?
Well, when the time comes, I'll certainly think about it. Obviously, I'm working really hard here. I enjoy my work in Congress, despite its clear frustrations. So when the time comes, which will be in the next year or two, I'll think about how I can best serve the people that I represent and pursue policy that I think puts the American worker and the American family first. And if I conclude that staying in Congress is the best way for me to do it, I will. If running for governor is a better option, then I'll certainly be willing to pursue that. So I certainly have not taken it off the table. I'm not thinking a lot about it right now, though.